Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight for our Eating Disorder Hope Google Hangout. I am Crystal Carcass, and I am joined by our special guest today, Jessica Setnick. So welcome, Jessica. Thank you for being here with us today. And in case for our viewers who may not be familiar, Jessica is a giant in the eating disorder community. You've just done so much incredible work, and you've had a lot of courses and training opportunities for eating disorder professionals who may already be working. I've actually had the opportunity to listen to one of your boot camp trainings. And you're also a dietitian as well, and currently you are serving as a senior fellow at Remuda Ranch Treatment Center. Is that right?
Yes, it is. I love working with Remuda, and the senior fellow position, even though I'm not a senior and I'm not a fellow, is a really great fit for my skills. I go to Remuda once a month for a week and do staff training and lead groups for residents. And then the rest of the time I get to spread the news about Remuda to the world of professionals. So it's a great fit.
Awesome. That's so wonderful. Well, can you just share maybe a little bit with us about your journey in the eating disorder community, kind of what you've been doing in the field? And you talked a little bit about what you do now, but how did you get to the place where you are now?
So at first it was a little bit atypical. I was an anthropology major in college, didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. And then nutrition class was an elective. Loved it. Ended up getting that bachelor's degree in anthropology and then going on to get a master's in sports nutrition. And my goal was to be the nutritionist for the Dallas
Journey in the eating disorder community.
Crystal.
Yeah, sorry about that. Can you still hear me okay?
Yeah, should I start my answer again?
Yes, please continue.
Okay. Um, Sorry, I got thrown off there for a second. I was an anthropology major, and then I went to get my master's in sports nutrition. And while I was in school getting my master's, I really fell in love with the aspects of disordered eating that relate to anthropology, the decisions
Mm-hmm.
we make and the development of humans, both as a group and then humans as individuals. And I came to believe that eating disorders are not bad choices people make, but choices that people make that are survival skills. And yet they're not survival skills that are really needed. So we as treaters need to find out why someone made the choices they made in order to be able to help them no longer make those choices. So it was
Mm-hmm.
a natural fit for me, even though I believe that in the field of dietetics, the psychology of eating and the reasons people make their choices should be important in every area. At that time, really, it was only recognized in eating disorders that those were areas of importance. So I changed my focus from sports nutrition to eating disorders, and along the way was able to work on my own eating issues, gratefully. And then I went to work. My first job was at Children's Medical Center of Dallas. It was Children's Hospital then. And they had just started an eating disorders program. It was a clinic, 2 hours, 3 hours a week, I think. And so I joined there. I was the first dietitian for the program, and then it really expanded into a full IOP, day treatment, partial hospital, and full hospitalization for kids and teens with eating disorders. After 2 years there, I went into private practice. And after
Okay.
private practice, I realized a lot of people had questions. A lot of professionals had questions about treating individuals with eating disorders. And so I started Eating Disorders Boot Camp as a way to help other treaters develop their skills in this area. And then after 15 years in private practice, I left. I closed my practice to be a speaker full time. And that's when I joined Remuda.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. And it's just been amazing to see all the work that you've done in the field and how many professionals that you've helped. And I think there's a lot of misconceptions about eating disorders, mostly in the general public, but I think even amongst professionals too. And I just think it's wonderful that you have an amazing message that really brings clarity and truth to the topic, because there's already so much stigma that surrounds eating disorders.
I agree.
And so that kind of brings me to our topic for tonight, which is about anorexia. And I've heard you speak a lot on the topic. And I think the criteria for diagnosing anorexia has kind of evolved with new research that's come out. Can you maybe share a little bit about your experience with treating anorexia and just how you've come to understand this disorder?
Sure. And I'll just say that I don't even think treating anorexia is the terminology I would use because we don't really have a good treatment for anorexia. What we have
Hmm.
is we have the ability to help people manage anorexia, but we don't have
Sure.
a treatment cure that is 100% effective. All we can do is say, this is a brain dysfunction, and we can look at the things that this disease, which we don't even know what it is, are causing in your life, and we can try to undo them or change them or modify them. But unfortunately, in the strict sense of treating disease, we don't have a good treatment for anorexia. It's really a big question mark, unfortunately, in the field. And I think that a lot of that has to do with the fact that it's a mental illness. I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that it's been very, as you said, stigmatized and not a disease that has, a ribbon and big benefit galas and that kind of thing. And so there's not
Hmm.
a ton of research that helps us to know how to treat anorexia. So we end up really offering management to patients. And sometimes I think we stumble upon treatment that is effective. And so with individuals with anorexia, really to me, all that says when you say the word anorexia is that someone isn't getting enough to eat. And
Hmm.
there's lots of reasons why someone might be in that situation. So the number one treatment is that someone needs to get nutritionally restored if they are starved. And it doesn't actually mean, in my mind, that they're underweight. You can actually be a normal
Right.
weight or even what society would consider overweight and still not eat enough and still be malnourished. And so it's very important that we help individuals get better nourished because when someone's malnourished, their brain isn't working correctly. However, the malnutrition is not the root of anorexia. Something caused that person to start the starvation process. And so we have to
Right.
puzzle out what that is. Was it a biological illness? Was it something like emotional trauma that happened? Is it some kind of lifelong situation? Is it something that is ingrained in their genes? And we don't really know the answers to these. So we try to help puzzle it out through psychotherapy and other kinds of counseling. And through that, hopefully, we can get some insight together with that individual and help them realize what is the survival skill of anorexia, because humans don't starve themselves to death because they're stupid. Humans starve
Right.
themselves because there's some kind of payoff. And whether that is a biological payoff in the brain that actually counters depression or counters anxiety or counters obsessive thoughts, that's different for each person. And so that's what we have to figure out is why is this person using starvation or malnutrition and how can we correct that?
Sure. And thank you for explaining that. That definitely makes sense. And I think it's so important to look at anorexia in the full picture like that.
Yeah, I think a
Mm.
lot of people think that anorexia is starvation and that starvation, that the problems of anorexia are then bone damage and things like that. Those things all come after anorexia. Anorexia is a disease that we still don't actually know what it is.
Hmm. Very good point. And that brings me to my next question for you, which is what is actually the defining criteria for anorexia? Because you mentioned that someone can be malnourished and still really not be losing weight, and I think that's a misconception about anorexia is that, well, if I haven't lost a lot of weight, then I must be okay. But again, that's, not necessarily the truth.
Yeah, to me, the defining criteria for anorexia is not eating enough to sustain life.
Hmm. And how do professionals look at anorexia in terms of a diagnosis? Are there certain criteria that professionals are looking at to be able to make the diagnosis of anorexia?
The DSM, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, and we're on number 5 now, and 5 tried to improve upon 4 by giving additional criteria and taking away some criteria for anorexia. But truly, the DSM doesn't describe the human experience of anorexia. But yes, what professionals will use is the DSM criteria, which are not eating enough, being underweight, although the DSM-5 gave us atypical anorexia, which is anorexia in someone who is of an appropriate weight or, again, overweight by society's standards. So weight is not a criteria anymore. Um, Not having a period for 3 months, which is called amenorrhea, as you probably,
Mm-hmm.
that was a criteria in DSM-4 for anorexia and is no longer. And
Mm-hmm.
then doing things that prevent weight gain or saying someone doesn't want to gain weight. Those would be the main criteria for anorexia, is not eating enough and not recognizing that it's a problem.
Right. Thank you for explaining that. And let's talk about anorexia from maybe the eyes of a loved one or family members. I think oftentimes people that have anorexia suffer in silence and isolate themselves and hide the reality of what's going on. What would you say are some of the things that family members or friends should be aware of if they're concerned that someone they care about is struggling with anorexia?
Sure. Well, to me, the most obvious thing is a change in eating patterns. So if someone has always been, let's say, a light eater, they may not have anorexia, but someone who's always been an appropriate eater and then becomes a light eater, that to me is the concern. So it's really a change in behavior is what might be most noticeable to family. Now, on the other hand, there are lots of family members who don't eat together, who wouldn't observe what another member of their family is eating or who wouldn't notice a change. And so it can't be the only thing people look for. But to me, that's the most dramatic thing that would identify anorexia as a dramatic change in eating behavior. The problem is sometimes it's a slower change and sometimes it's a hidden change, as you said. So someone's outward behaviors might not look any different and they may only be doing things differently when no one else is around, as you said. So
Mm-hmm.
really, it's what a family or family member or friend might also notice is a change in mood. Anorexia sometimes goes along with depression or anxiety or isolating. Someone who used to enjoy doing things outside of the house and now only wants to stay home, that can also be a symptom of depression, but it can be a symptom of depression that goes along with anorexia. And also, a symptom of depression is a lack of interest in food. So, really, any of these signs that a family member sees, I think, should be evaluated by a mental health professional because it's
Right.
not easy to just see the symptom and say, here is the disease, because it could be a symptom of a lot of different things. And so
Right.
that's why a lot of times anorexia goes undiagnosed for a while, because if someone starts losing weight or has lack of interest in food, there are a lot of things it could be. And so sometimes we tend to check, or doctors tend to check for other things that could be going wrong. Or someone, let's say, has changes in their menstrual cycle or,
Mm-hmm.
personality changes. We as a society might tend to check other things or energy level and not necessarily clue in because no one's asking about someone's eating. And so in a lot of
Right.
studies that have investigated anorexia, it turns out that a lot of patients say that they would have talked about their eating except no one ever asked them.
Right. Exactly. And, it's such a touchy subject, like you were saying. And I think even for family members who do observe that there may be changes, they might not necessarily know, like, what are the best ways to approach this person? Or, how would you recommend for a family member or a friend who's really concerned about some behavioral changes that they see in someone they love? What are some ways to approach them?
As a society, make it a touchy subject, but I don't think it has to be. I think it's just a matter of, this is what I've noticed, because I do think that we want to open the door to the possibility that we've misunderstood. And I think people wait sometimes too long because they want to be sure before they approach someone. But I don't think that you need to. I think it's appropriate to address things the same way you would address anything with your family member. And of course, therein lies the problem, is sometimes we get pretty detached from our own family members. If everyone's, sitting around in the house doing their own device, then there's not a lot of opportunity really to strike up a conversation. But ideally, the goal would be when you're alone with that person, because no one likes to think that others are talking about them behind their back or that everyone's ganging up on them. So when you're alone with that person, or you can make time alone, just say, these are the things I've noticed and I wanted to hear your point of view on them. and just
Right.
open the door. And that's all you really have to do. I think a lot of people don't want to say anything because they don't know what they'll do with the answer. I think that's the same reason a lot of doctors don't ask about eating, because they don't know what they'll do with the answer. But I can tell you, you don't have to know. All you have to do is open the door. And then when you find out what the answers are, you can say, just like anything else, all right, we need to get someone involved who can tell us more about it. So just like if you notice someone in your family has a big rash on their face, just say, I wanted to check in with you about that rash. And maybe that person will say they're already getting help, or maybe they'll say they never even noticed the rash. And depending on what their answer is, that's when you determine what to do next. And if they say, I know I have this crazy rash and I don't know what to do about it, then you say, you know what, I'm going to look on the internet, get some information, or I'm going to call a friend I know that had a rash on their face. You don't have to know all the answers before you ask the question. You just have to open the door. And then once you start getting some answers, that will point you to what to do next.
Sure. That definitely makes sense. And I think that that's reassuring to hear too, that you don't have to know all the answers off the bat, that just helping someone even take that step to say, I might not know everything that's going on, but I sure want to get help and figure out how to get to the bottom of this.
I don't have all the answers to everything. I think that's part of working with an illness that is so ununderstood, so not understood. So, even the most experienced professional doesn't have all the answers about anorexia, and yet we still kind of blunder into it as best we can. And I would say that's the same thing for anyone else. We just have to take the information we have and then find a source that can help us get more information, and hopefully they send us on to a source when they run out of information, and we have to keep trying.
Sure. That's so good to hear too, because I think it's important for people to know that even though we don't know all the answers, you can still get help, and you can still, like you said, manage this disorder and make life better and make life easier than what it is.
You don't have to organize an intervention just to go talk to your own family member. I think that people can make it into too high of a barrier. And you'll get a lot of information out of that first conversation about whether that person's in denial and you do need to go to the next level without them, or whether they're absolutely ready to get help and just need to know where to turn and need to know that you support them. And every once in a while, you might find out that person already is getting help and they just hadn't said much about it, and they might be really grateful to have a person they can confide in.
Exactly. And just speaking out, I think, helps break the isolation and the shame that is so often surrounding anorexia.
There's really no reason for anyone to be ashamed. It's just that is part of the illness for some reason. It's part of really a lot of mental illnesses, not necessarily part of the illness itself, but part of what our society has socialized us about mental illness. So if someone, was jumping on the bed, and even though they knew they weren't supposed to jump on the bed, but they're jumping on the bed anyway, if they broke their leg, you'd cry out for help, even if you felt like it's a little bit your fault. But for some reason with anorexia and other eating disorders, people think it's all their fault. It's a shameful thing. I can't tell anyone that I broke my leg, but it's really more like having broken feelings. Shameful, and it's just as harmful as not telling anyone when you broke your leg and trying to fix it yourself.
Thank you for explaining it that way. And I think it's really important for anyone who's struggling with anorexia to hear that message, that it's not your fault and you can find a way to get help and treatment and to get better.
But it's really pervasive for people to think, especially if their anorexia in their mind started with a diet or something that they feel like they had conscious control over. No one asks for anorexia, although I take that back. There's sometimes even people who say, I wish I had anorexia, but just wishing for it doesn't make it happen. There's a biological piece to it, and if you have it, you have it. And
right.
And I wish that nobody had to have anorexia, but it doesn't actually make you a bad person or any kind of a failure, and it's just really important to get help.
Sure. Let's talk a little bit about treatment for anorexia. What are some of the evidence-based treatments that are being used to treat this disorder? I mean, it is one of the highest mortality psychiatric illnesses. And how are treatment teams dealing with this disorder?
So remember, we're not actually treating the illness, we're only treating the symptoms. So because
Right.
one of the symptoms of anorexia is malnutrition, one of the main treatments for anorexia is nutritional restoration. And so in some cases that can happen in the home, in some cases it happens in a hospital, in some cases it happens in a different kind of treatment center, like the kind of treatment center Remuda has hospital and residential care. There are other kinds of treatment programs that are out in the community, but nutritional restoration is extremely important because that is the most dangerous symptom of anorexia. It's the one that can cause death and all kinds of medical complications. Medical complications need to be treated, even though that's not the cause of anorexia. Any medical complications that come from starvation need to also be treated as well. And then in an effort to try to unravel how someone got into this situation in the first place, that's where counseling then would come in as a treatment. And there are a lot of different types of counseling that can be used to try to treat the mental aspects of anorexia. That includes CBT and DBT and ACT, all different kinds of talk therapy. And then there are also some kinds of brain therapy like neuro and biofeedback and some other newer kinds of technologies that are showing some promise for helping manage anorexia. Oh, and I can't forget about medication. There is no medication that is approved to treat anorexia itself, again, because we don't know what the disease is, so there's no way to treat it. But we could treat some of the underlying symptoms or some of the consequential symptoms of anorexia with psychoactive medications.
Thank you so much for explaining that. And I think it's helpful to see, that it's a collaborative approach, that the treatment involves different aspects, and it's kind of like in layers, like you were saying, first addressing those medical concerns and nutritional restoration, and then being able to look at like possible underlying factors. Sorry, did you have any final notes about that or anything else you wanted to add?
When someone's in a crisis management stage, you don't really have the luxury of looking at underlying factors. You kind of have to help treat and manage any of the immediate medical concerns. And then a later stage would be, you sort of have the luxury, if you will, of looking at some of the underlying factors.
Sure. Yes, that definitely makes sense. And kind of just in closing, what encouragement would you share with someone who either is struggling with anorexia themselves, or maybe even just for family members who are concerned about someone in their family who has anorexia or possible symptoms of anorexia? What would be your encouragement to them?
Well, definitely reach out for professional help. I like a quote from Einstein that, and I'm not going to quote it exactly correctly, but something like, you can't solve a problem with the same mind that created it. And so we end up in that situation with a lot of mental illness, thinking it's our fault or thinking we can fix it or solve it. I would just use the analogy of a broken leg and just say, you can't fix it yourself. You're not an expert. I mean, if your car is broken, you take it to a mechanic unless you are a mechanic. But if your mind is broken, let's say, or your feelings, you have to go to an expert on feelings and minds and brains. And it's not appropriate to try to fix it yourself. But for some reason, this anorexia is a disease that has mental aspects that make the individual with anorexia not realize how severe it is. That is just illness, is not realizing how severe it is and thinking it's something fixable. And so if you're a family member, for example, and you know someone in your family is struggling, there may be what seems like negotiation and manipulation, things like, oh, just give me 2 more weeks, I can fix this myself. And I would say, don't do that, because there is no change. If someone were able to change it, they would have already changed it. It's not giving someone a chance. It's really giving someone a chance means getting them the professional help that they need. And so, walk through it together. Make it not an adversarial situation where it's me against you, but it's us together. And if for whatever reason your family member doesn't want to get treatment, go yourself. Make an appointment and go and talk to a counselor or a dietitian or doctor who is an expert in eating disorders. And I guess there's a caution to my my encouragement, which is that not every doctor, dietitian, therapist, nurse knows about eating disorders. And so you can actually get some very bad advice. So it's important that you find an eating disorder professional. There are lots of websites. I think Eating Disorder Hope has a professional directory. I know that to find a dietitian, you can go to ifed.com, ifedd.com. You really want to find an expert, whether it's in your area or someone you need to meet with over the phone or via computer. You want to have an expert that can really guide you as far as what the next steps are. And when you find someone that you can trust, even if you need to get a second opinion, know that there may be a higher level of care needed. And so it's really important when someone enters a higher level of care that they complete a program, not just go for a couple of days or a week. It's a 7-year recovery process from anorexia. It takes 2 years just for a brain to recover from being starved. That's a
Wow.
long time. So know that you're
Yeah.
small and don't panic and stick with treatment, because it's so important that you don't leave treatment or your family member doesn't leave treatment too soon.
That is such wonderful feedback. Thank you for sharing that. And I like how you describe the timeline, you know, that it's a process, because I think so many people want that quick fix, want it to just go away, want it to just get better, but
you hate to see anyone in your family be sick or be suffering. Of course you want a quick fix. Of course. There's nothing wrong with wanting it. It's just unfortunate that we don't get that in the case of anorexia.
sure. And I think it's important for people to hear that too, you know, that you just need to stick with the treatment and not give up. Of course, there's going to be setbacks, but the persistence in continuing with your treatment is what will propel you to long-term recovery.
Yeah, you said that really well.
Aw. Well, I've learned a lot from you. Well, do you have any closing thoughts, or can you maybe share with us a little bit of about where we could learn more about yourself or Remuda Ranch?
Sure. Well, of course, Remuda's website is remudaranch.com, and Remuda is spelled Remuda, and there's information about all of our programs there. You can find more information from me here or about me here and there on the internet. My own website is understandingnutrition.com, and then there's another one called jessicasetnick.com. JessicaSetnick.com is more about me. Understandingnutrition.com is where Eating Disorders Boot Camp and some other of my workshops and things are available if someone wants more information of that kind. And I'm happy to be in contact with anyone that's hearing this that needs some help or guidance. I can try to point you in the right direction. My email address is info@understandingnutrition.com, and I'd be happy to hear from you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Jessica. And again, we just really appreciate your insight and you being willing to be here with us and share all of this great information. I think it's really important to continue to get the word out and help people understand more about anorexia.
Well, it's my pleasure, and thank you for all that you do at Eating Disorder Hope.
Thank you, Jessica. And thank you to everyone that participated in our chat tonight. Please visit eatingdisorderhope.com if you're looking for any type of treatment resources. We also will be having some more information about our upcoming Google Hangouts and Twitter chats that we would love for you to participate in. So thank you again, and take care, everyone. Thank you so much, Jessica.
Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.